Hello, everyone. I'm Jim Garrison. I want to welcome you to this session of Humanity Rising as we contemplate better business through an empowering of better business leadership. If I had to state the most intractable challenge in our world, of which there are many, as you all know, I would say that among the most important and intractable challenges of our time is the reformation of business. Monopoly capitalism dominates our world. Neoliberal capitalism dominates our world. It's an economic system that prioritizes profit above everything else. It's codified into the laws of most countries that shareholder value needs to be the preeminent priority. And we're in a world dominated by the corporate imperative. Governments now serve business. It has not always been so. And that's very important for us to become aware of. In antiquity, business was essentially a function of state trade. It was the king and the priest that dominated. In the Middle Ages, particularly in Europe, it was the Catholic Church that dominated, and business was a subordinate function. There were rules based on ethical principles against charging interest. And with the rise of the Enlightenment and with the rise of technology and science, came the rise initially in England, but then European countries in North America, United States and Canada embraced this notion articulated by Adam Smith in The Wealth of Nations, published, as it turned out, in 1776, the same year that the United States of America was founded, that articulated an economic theory that prioritized free trade, competition, and profit. And even though Adam Smith wrote a secondary essay, actually, on the need to base this economic freedom and economic capital formation on some kind of moral foundation, that essay was essentially ignored. And now we have a world in which the entire planetary ecology has been devastated to such an extent that we have exacerbated through global warming because of industrial output, the climate change that is now challenging every country in the world and the possible destruction of human civilization itself. But at no point do any of our governments stop the business sector. If you want to understand the impulse around the genocide in Gaza, there are racial, political factors, but those factors are animated by profit. If you want to understand the carnage going on in Ukraine and the inability and refusal of the governments to actually solve the problem, animating that paralysis and incompetence of will is business profit. Business leaders have been talking about this for a long time. And with very few exceptions, Has anything really been done about it? Another example is what's been going on in the Conference of Parties over the last several years as the governments of the world come together to try to solve climate change. In 2023 and in 2024, the conferences were chaired by the ministers of oil, the heads, the CEOs of the biggest fossil fuel companies in Abu Dhabi and this year in Azerbaijan. And there were more business consultants at the COP than NGOs. So when we talk about better business and better business leadership, it's very important for us to take in the seriousness of this challenge. It may be the most intractable challenge before the human race, which if we could solve, would produce the better world and the abundant future that we seek. It's a koan. It's like the sound of one hand clapping, moderating the profit motive and the sociopathic conduct of business, not only in the West, but because the West conquered the world through colonialism. It's a global challenge in every country. And so it's with particular interest that I met recently Elizabeth Lagerstad, who's a Swedish business executive and coach and trainer who has founded a company called Future Navigators, who's dedicating her life and her extraordinary creative intelligence to producing better business and better business leadership. And so we had a conversation, and I asked her if she'd be willing to share her views on Humanity Rising for our community. Because as you all know, we've dealt with business in many, many sessions and grappled with these issues. And now I want to welcome Elizabeth to Humanity Rising. Elizabeth is going to tell us a little bit more about herself. She has a slide presentation, and then when she's concluded that, I'll circle back and we'll dialogue about this very important issue confronting the human community as we quite literally teeter on the precipice of self-destruction because we have not moderated our business impulses and our passion for profit. Thank you, Elizabeth. I turn the program over to you.
Thanks so much, Jim. What an introduction. Oh my. I'm going to start by sharing the presentation actually, because I've been thinking about this a lot, as I presume that Jim's introduction showed you. Anyway, so what I would like to try to do today is give you all some food for thought on how better businesses and a better future can be enabled by better business leaders. And I base it on some of the thinkings from two of my books, Navigate into the Future in Swedish, and Better Business, Better Future, which is available in English. Now, what I wanted to start with is just a few words about me. What I do in my everyday is more or less running a company that I call Future Navigators. I've been doing that for the past 10 years or so. I've been in business, responsible business, I have to say, and a sustainability brand pioneer in the 1990s. So I'm 55, right? So I have a lot of years spent in different types of businesses, whereof 15 years on management teams and 10 years as a consultant and executive coach, where I actually help business leaders get to the core of this problem. I have a rather rich educational background that I base this on. I'm also an executive coach. I'm a fellow of the Institute of Coaching, an IDG ambassador, B leader, and a climate reality leader. I am Swedish, though. I am based in Sweden. As much as I wanted, you need to be patient with me, even though I work internationally, and I have throughout my career, I do have a Northern European perspective. So just kind of let that, pass. Maybe it's enriching, maybe it's triggering, I don't know. I'm hoping that I can bring something of interest to you. An inspirational perspective, that's what I'm hoping. So if you want to change the world, start with yourself. Gandhi once famously said that. And some of the questions I've been asking myself over the years is this: how can we understand the world? How can we be informed by the past, present, and the future unfolding? And how can we resist change and renewal on all levels of society, even though it's inherent property of life, even at the cost of the future of humanity? And how could we co-create a better future? And what might be the role of businesses and business leaders like myself? And what happens if we actually choose to see business leaders and entrepreneurs as potential acupuncture points of systemic change? And what capacities would those business leaders lead, or business leaders in general, need to lead and inspire co-creation of that better business and that better future? How can that be developed? How can it be supported? Can it even be accelerated? And who am I in all of this? And how could I best serve whatever wants to unfold? So it's a lot of questions, and they're far more than these. And they have evolved as I've been writing, because that's my own process. And I'm continuing to do that. So hopefully you'll find more books coming forward. Now, I have three things I want to talk to you about today. The first one, very, very rapidly, about the wicked problems. I think Jim framed it. And then I want to talk about the challenges from a business and business leader perspective, and think about an invitation to, if we can view it slightly differently and see it as a potential rather than only a threat. As you know, and as Jim pointed out, we are already beyond 6 out of the 9 planetary boundaries. It's been identified by Professor Johan Rockström and his team at Stockholm's Resilience Center, and we are facing the unintended consequences of human production and consumption, and we're simply, overutilizing a problem with a planet with finite resources. And if we continue, planetary systems will be destabilized, and life and civilizations as we know it will be at risk. And it's not only that, there are a number of other interconnected forces at play. For instance, societal polarization, misinformation, disinformation, armed conflict, cyber insecurity, and the lot. And they're all interconnected in what's called a polycrisis by many. Now, in my world, I call this VUCA. It's volatility, it's complexity, it's uncertainty and ambiguity. And we pretty much live in a VUCA world. Now, you could say, well, yeah, maybe. I'm not really sure how that relates to me. And maybe I'm not even sure how I can, take us out of this problem in the first place. Maybe I'll just, step back and not really care. That's one way of coping with it. The other way of coping with it is to show curiosity. And that's what I'm inviting you to do today. Just sit here with curiosity and think about what I'm presenting. So the challenges I see is pretty much this: we cannot solve our problems with the same type of thinking we used when we created them, famously said by Einstein. And in this case, and I also heard that with Jim, business is often presented as the problem. To me, coming from the business world, and of course being biased, but also recognizing and realizing the amazing capabilities that are possible to access through the resources, the ingenuity, creativity, innovativeness, and collaboration that we can actually so often call forth. That inspires me, and that makes me see potential for business as a force for good. Yes, I do acknowledge far too many are still ignoring the wicked problems of our lifetime. You are absolutely right. But I do see something cooking in the world of business on the horizon. To me, it's a paradigm shift that seems to be on its way, where we are leaving the old and sort of looking into what is evolving in the new paradigm. The old business paradigm is what Jim presented. It's short-termism driven by financial markets. The purpose of business is to maximize short-term profits for shareholders. It's a take, make, dispose logic. You collaborate in industry associations, not so much more, and corporate social responsibility is practiced just to reduce risk and safeguard reputation. Harsh truth. Evolving in the horizon, I rather see a long-termism coming up, not only encouraged by the financial markets to protect their long-term investments, but also from conscious business and purpose-led business leaders. And I see that the purpose of business is turning into, in the horizon again, a possibility to advance prosperity of humanity within the boundaries set by nature. I see circular and regenerative and more equitable business models and operating models growing, or at least being experimented with. And I see sustainability and even regeneration, which is still far out in the horizon to a large extent, at least when really practiced, but sustainability being, in this case, fully integrated into purpose, strategy, business models, value chains, and offerings, and new types of models for collaboration based on mutual interest and the higher good, somehow making way in this distant horizon. Practiced by some, practiced by a few still, but the interest for this is definitely growing. And what I wrote about in my book is that this avenue from the business as usual mindset and perspective is evolving. You could at least say we can bridge that gap that has unfolded to the horizon with what I call better business, which takes us one step further. And it's not as, how should I say, stressful for business leaders to just leave what they already have and grasp for something new that they don't know what it's like. So just taking steps in that direction would actually help. And that's what I call better business. It is purpose-driven. It has a long-term focus. It creates share value for stakeholders. It's increasingly sustainable and circular, not fully. It focuses on the whole business ecosystem. It's purpose-driven, aiming to minimize social cost and ecological footprint, but it's not regenerative yet. And sustainability slowly becomes integrated into the purpose and the strategy, and the systemic efforts taken help this encapsulate the whole corporation and also prepare for the next level. So thinking about taking small incremental steps, it may sound like a small incremental step, but for most business leaders, this is actually a pretty large step. And that's probably more what we would say is a sustainable business today. I call it better business because I think it's so much more than sustainable. So to me, when I do this work, I, for instance, see startup entrepreneurs as really interesting acupuncture points in the system. They can be catalysts for innovation. They can be purpose-driven. They can be focused on or beyond legacy systems and act quickly and boldly. They can experiment. They can be successful ecosystem builders, build new systems, and create ripple effects where they're active. And they can also inspire consumers as well as policymakers and competitors to rethink what is possible. You may think that senior business leaders are lost. I do not think so. To me, they're also critical acupuncture points. They have, especially if you look at the CEO level, which I've taken the opportunity to do here, the CEO has a position of influence. They operate at the nexus of multiple systems, and their decisions ripple outward, influencing interconnected systems. They have the power to allocate resources and reallocate them based on their decision making. With the right set of values, they also set the tone for the organizational culture and values, and have and with a purpose-driven leadership, they can really inspire their teams and actually beyond the organization to move in the right direction. And their strategic decision making, their choices made, can actually change the path of the company into a more interesting development. And quite honestly, to survive and thrive in the challenging environment ahead, the strategic decision making will become key, and that needs to be grounded in sound values and a systemic thinking. Otherwise, those strategies will be worthless. And finally, there are also a lot of CEOs that have a possibility to take the role as a public profile. And some has, and they should continue doing that if they aim to inspire others to create cascading effects of what they do. Now, you can imagine that if a person of the old-fashioned mindset operates like this, using the power that comes with their position to communicate and try to expand the old philosophy, you will have quite different results than if you think about someone that operates from a value set and a mindset that is more mature, that looks more at the whole and the benefit for the whole of society, not only of their shareholders. So this is the type of dynamic I'm looking for, and why I believe the senior business leader is so important to reach. Now, what I'm seeing too is that there is a disconnect between what we say and what we do, because this is just a few research points or studies I've picked up, but and it's a few years old, but here 99% of CEOs agreed that sustainability issues are important to the future success of their business. However, what we then do is something else. Only 8% of companies at this point had some sort of science-based target. Only 17% of companies had incorporated a circular approach in product design, and 51% said that sustainability will be the greatest challenge for their organization over the next 2 to 3 years. So again, what we say and what we do is not really coherent. And what I would like to do here is to try to go a bit beyond the surface and try to deep dive a bit into, or just kind of scratch the surface actually, of our mental models and beyond, because that's where the interventions are really interesting. I don't think there are a lot of technical issues and technical problems needing to be solved. But underlying all of this is the way we think based on what we believe, who we believe we are, our values and our beliefs that are shaping us and the whole society actually as we shape community. So just ponder this. What if the solutions we seek are not out there, right? What if it's all about us as individuals, our biology? What if our brains are actually wired to react to this uncertain world with fear? And what if that triggers our stress response? That is not our best selves. And quite honestly, this is what is going on. Looking at a CEO, for instance, and the demands of a CEO today, you have a huge fear of failure. They will lose their job if they don't perform as to shareholder expectations or board pressures. And they're pulled between a number of different priorities that they somehow need to juggle. So it's not so strange that they're challenged, right? And that their brains need to somehow hold this complexity and uncertainty in some way. And yes, that's challenging. And what does stress do to us, especially negative stress? Some positive stress can be good for performance, but negative stress, guys, it will actually impair your cognitive functions. You will get your memory won't work as good. Your attention span, your problem-solving capacities. You will rather focus on what is straight in front of you rather than, long-term things. You will go into fight and flight rather than think about long-term visions and solutions and how to solve the problems of our world, you will become more impulsive. You will, become strained in relationships with team members and may have difficulties providing clear guidance. You may become impaired in your communication and ways of collaborating, and you will actually be less creative and innovative. So imagine that this is actually part of what is playing out in business, that there are a lot of not only business leaders, but a lot of people that live in this stress and that actually become really short-sighted due to it. So think about it this way instead. What if we are in over our heads as individual business leaders and as a collective, and simply choose to step back into our comfort zone, unaware that we're delaying the response the world so badly needs? That is, we're focusing on what we can control, what is safe, low risk, what people are asking of us in our business, what we're used to doing, and what we've got, and what we were rewarded for doing, actually. And especially senior business leaders who have grown up, as myself, in the business as usual mindset. That is how you do business. That's what we've been taught. To dare to go beyond that comfort zone, to go into learning and growth, just realizing that you need to do it is one thing. And then going beyond that fear zone where the uncertainty just turns on all that stress before you actually can start turning on that curiosity and learn to solve problems, learn new skills, take on challenges, look for opportunities, and ultimately setting goals that are beyond yourself, for not only yourself, but actually for your entire ecosystem. My question is, of course, will we continue to resort to our comfort zone and limit our own future, as well as that of coming generations? Or can we somehow help our brain and nervous system to hold more of that which is coming? Well, meditation and personal development in terms of stillness, mindfulness practices, these are absolutely part of the solution, but it will not solve everything. And what I think is so interesting when I dwell into this is that there is the most interesting realization, actually, I think, is, for me at least, that being in over our heads, we're told that it's stressful and stress is negative. The fact is that being in over our heads is also an invitation to grow. And I'm going to talk a bit about this now. And I think this is really interesting. The father of transformative learning, called Jack Metzero, I'm sure some of you know him. I didn't know him actually till I stumbled on him a few years back. But what he said is pretty much that when our world is shaken to its core and everything we've ever held as true is questioned, we experience disorienting dilemmas. Those are moments when our minds are stretched beyond its capacity to get back to its original shape. It's actually a crossroad when life simply doesn't make sense anymore, extremely disorienting. And when our current lens, the glasses we wear, is of no use anymore. And in these moments, we're actually offered an opportunity to grow our minds into new ways of seeing, changing glasses. Big difference. You don't see a difference, do you? But I do. Anyway, I'm putting these back on again. So changing glasses and actually scaling up glasses and seeing even more of what is, because that's what's at stake here. That's the reward for actually daring to be with that disorienting dilemma. And that kind of stretching leads to transformation. And at its core, that's what we've come to call vertical development. And vertical leadership development is actually what I do as part of my executive coaching. So in its essence, what we're invited to is to grow up as adults, as children do, right? But as adults grow up, we actually become increasingly capable of understanding complexity, embracing different perspectives, and integrating our inner experiences with the outer world. So I may have a lot of inner experiences from meditation and other types of activities, reflection, nature walks, experiences that I may not talk so much about until I feel safe to do that. And we're invited to actually integrate that into our outer world to become whole and utilize that wholeness to bring something more positive and enriching to the world. And this journey of adult or vertical development can lead to enhanced and expanded leadership capacities. It can lead to wisdom and a greater sense of purpose, systems thinking, and connection with the broader world that we're part of. It's not only about me, it's more about we, and it's even about all of us. You see the difference? And I'm sure some of you who've been on this for a while recognize also the slight reference to Ken Wilber and the idea of waking up, cleaning up, growing up, and showing up, right? Because that's pretty much the journey we need. There are other words for this when I talk about adult development, or in this case, vertical leadership development. This is a graph that I picked up from the internet. It's commonly attributed to Ken Wilber and other types of thinkers that kind of put this together. There are many different frameworks out there that have looked at what does adult development actually look like. And I'm not going to dwell on this here. I just want to invite you, if you haven't explored this yet, to look into adult development and vertical leadership development frameworks. It is really, really interesting and really enriching, and I would love to come back and talk about that one day. What we're seeing is that this journey is upward. So if I go back one slide, this journey actually, you need to kind of take care of the challenges on the lower levels in this context before you actually have the capacities to step up to the next level and grow and evolve. That's the whole thought behind it. And when I look at the leaders we need to go from business as usual to better business and regenerative business, I see that we need to go from the typical business as usual achiever state, where you would see that CEO coming from an extreme goal orientation, very rational thinking, individualism, material success, and strategic optimization. That represents about 55% of the executive population today, into something that's called the catalyst, which is actually a post-conventional state, going beyond the way we're used to thinking, having dealt with disorienting dilemmas and coming out on the other side, where we're slightly, actually, in that stage, we're slightly confused because we know what we've left to some extent, and we try to find a new way of dealing with the world and our work. And here we focus more on relationships, values, collaboration, empathy, inclusivity. We become more value-driven. We get an emerging system awareness. We start to noticing interdependencies, but we can't really navigate it yet. And there is this sense of using culture and relations and value-driven frameworks to create transformation or change, actually, but you still don't really have the capacities to really, really accomplish systemic transformation. That, however, unfolds after another couple of, disorienting dilemmas, more or less, that you've had to deal with, going into yourself, working with your shadows, understanding how systems come together and how systems work, and a lot of other perspectives. And what grows out of that is an integrated thinking, a purpose-driven leadership, a very clear system awareness where you understand how systems work, and how to work with systems. You see the systems in a different way than that you've actually haven't been able to before. And you're also able to lead and complex change across teams, organizations, and ecosystems, and aligning efforts towards shared goals, not only within the organization, but beyond. And you also have a long-term vision that balances personal, organizational, and societal needs. And what we're seeing here is that about 32% or 30-ish% in the last study I saw are at catalyst level, but still only 8% are at synergist level. So I've been thinking a bit about that. What is going on? Is it that the synergist hasn't been valued as CEOs or business leaders? Are they too fluffy? Or do they kind of jump off the train themselves and become, like I do, start a consultancy, come in from the side, support the achievists in their expansion? Or what happens? It could also be that boards don't really, when they kind of frame the role of the leader that is going to take their business from one level to another, they're not looking for the synergist perspective. They're kind of looking for the traditional achievist. So I think this is both systemic in the system, so to say, and it's in the individual leader. But what the leaders we need to take on the challenges that we have are the synergists. And knowing a community of synergists, it's a really, really enriching place to be. And it's also hopeful. It's also hopeful. I just want to give some examples of, that this is a draft. So don't take this for, this is not the truth. This is a draft that I'm still working on. I've tried to explain the difference between the achievist mindset a bit more in detail and comparing it to the synergist leader that we need, that is more mature. And as you see here, if you just look around it, it's about how you lead your business and ecosystem, how you read and lead your organization, how you read and lead yourself. This is a lot about competition, setting goals, striving for success, promoting accountability, optimizing things, measuring with KPIs, fast returns. You see the traditional business mindset, right? And if you look at the synergist, it's more about aligning purpose and action, committing to personal growth, develop and deepen self-awareness and emotional intelligence, embracing complexity and ambiguity, and leading with systemic empathy. It's about leveraging dual operating systems, leading with a higher purpose, helping teams thrive, nurture a learning culture, clarify your purpose and impact, innovate for mutual benefit, and collaborate across systems. So it's quite a different way of operating. The whole operating system around a leader like that will actually look different because they will actually also help elevate their own organization. I think this is just so interesting. Now I'm a super nerd, I know, but when I stepped on the work by Alice Anagnostakis. It was her PhD dissertation. And she suddenly opened my eyes to the challenge, because what I'm seeing is that not everyone is interested in stepping up. That's my experience as an executive coach and consultant. So there needs to be that window of opportunity. And where does that come from? When does it come? And people being, or leaders being in a disorienting dilemma, having that to hold in front of them, that's one way for me to be called in. The other one is when I come in to work with strategy, looking into the future, 20 years into the future and going back to where we are, looking at different types of scenarios and looking at what is, if you want to survive and thrive in that future, who do you need to become? But in this case, in a leadership program, focused on actually creating this growth that we're talking about, only 1/3 of leaders stepped up when given the opportunity to grow. That was the whole purpose of the program, to help the leaders grow. And what happened in this study is that suddenly COVID-19 struck. So the leadership program, it continued, but it was definitely affected by the conditions. And what happened when Alice measured the outcome after 6 months is that 1/3 of leaders actually took on the challenge and grew in terms of the chosen vertical leadership development framework that she used. 1/3 stagnated. They didn't grow. They stayed where they were. And she found out that, isn't this interesting? 1/3 regressed. They stepped back into some earlier stage or comfort zone where they felt that, they were safe. And every one of these went through the same type of disorienting dilemmas and challenges during the period. And what she found, I think, is so profound. It's so simple, though. She found that those who shifted their capacity and mindset to a more mature level, they stand out from the rest based on their curiosity. That's the first one. They were curious. They had, they were in as a tough situation as the others, but they were curious. Their curiosity came out. And that made them capable of holding and exploring the difficult emotions they were actually feeling and those disorienting dilemmas that, were all around them. So imagine if it's that simple. If we know the type of leaders we need, how can we help leaders, not only 1/3 of leaders, but actually everyone that signs up to do this type of journey, because we need everyone to sign up, as many as possible. How can we help everyone to come out somehow through their emotional pains and disorienting dilemmas on the other side with a higher capacity to help shape and build the future that we need? So that's what I've been pondering lately. So to me, the next big questions are, of course, as the critical acupuncture points that they are, how can we best support business leaders in facing their emotional discomforts and fears and move beyond their comfort zones into learning and growth to higher levels of consciousness and capabilities? And how can we help business leaders become truly curious about the need for their own transformational growth in the first place? To me, this is what we're here for. We are called to be the architects of the future, not its victims. And it's our choice, right? And as the Inner Development Organization has noted, there is a pressing need to increase our collective abilities to face effectively work with complex challenges. This is not only needed for business leaders, but for all of us. So with that, my friends, my session is complete. And for you who would like to have a contact with me afterwards, here are my contact. Here is my contact information. And I will close with that, the sharing of my presentation and get back to Jim. Thank you. Are you with me, Jim? Hi, Jim.
Hello.
So that was my little food for thought session today. What happened in you?
Well, I think this was one of the more insightful and I would say profound treatments of both the problem and the solution set, Elizabeth, and I want to just acknowledge that and honor that. I'd make one or two comments, and then we can dive in. One is, it was striking me that when you were talking with the slide where you were talking about all the things that are impinging on the CEO, that could be any of us.
Yeah, you're right.
And I
We all
think
have those. Yeah.
one of the factors in our world is that we're having disorienting dilemmas as now part of daily life. It's not an exception anymore. It's just the way it is because the accumulated stressors in the culture uh, are impinging on all of us. And as you know from the non-business sector, the young people in particular are taking the hit. And 2/3 of young people worldwide now believe that, the world is doomed and there's not much point in doing very much, and all kinds of um, psychopathologies are emerging among the young at almost an epidemic level. So I just wanted to note that what pertains to the CEO is no longer unique to the CEO.
No,
Whether
you're
you're
so right.
an average housewife, just minding the kids, or you're the head of a major corporation. Here in the United States, for example, the CEO of a major healthcare HMO was shot.
Mm.
And just last week in New York City, as he was going into a shareholder meeting, and they haven't caught the guy who did it, but they looked at the bullet casings, and he did it with malicious intent.
Yeah.
And that was the other point that I wanted to make, and then have your comment, is that the impact of this compression on our psyche is causing more and more self-destructive and social destructive behavior at more and more levels. And I read an article just last week saying that what we used to think was an epidemic among the young is now a similar statistical epidemic among the old. So
Mm.
I'd love to have you just comment on, used to be we thought it was the CEO that had these pressures. Now all of us do. And and that means all of us need your training, which we'll get to in a moment. But just talk to us a little bit about your understanding about how the world is changing for all of us in the ways that you're describing for the CEO.
Yeah, actually, there are some really interesting reports on this. The UNDP have even found evidence of this in literature over the past decade, or I think there has been a major shift since 2010 or so, with increasing mental challenges actually, and increasing anxiety, signs of anxiety, not only playing out in literature, but also elsewhere. There are discussions whether this has to do with social media. That is the fact that we actually can share everything very transparently. And it's not only always true, it's also sometimes fake. So we're really challenged. Our cognitive system is overstimulated.
Yes.
And that creates a lot of unnatural stress, actually. On the other hand, I would say that stress has always been with us as humankind. However, it's not been this constant. And I think the constants or the constant stress that our nervous systems are experiencing is something that has, it's growing on us. And I somewhere read that we even walk faster in cities than we did 20 years ago. So it's playing out.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's playing out in so many different ways. And being stressed, we are not our best selves. We are not. And that's a first realization that may be the reason why we don't recognize ourselves, the reason why we get triggered, the reason why we react to things rather than quietly, calm our nervous system and respond wisely. Because we're so close from that everyday mindfulness that we're so far from that everyday mindfulness that we actually could be practicing, but that we're pretty much forgetting when we're not just sitting down in meditation or doing a nature walk or something like that. But in fact, we need to live this. It's not for the meditation session only. We need to come to a situation where we can actually calm our minds and nervous systems down. And I recently, actually last year, bumped into a really interesting neuropsychologist who also talks about this. She comes from trauma treatments, and has started working with leaders since it seems that it's not completely unsimilar. But what she says, also from working with family and other types of, members across society, she sees the major component being that we don't allow ourselves to be in emotional pain. So we kind of try to avoid emotional pain at every, to every extent, instead of actually using emotional pain as a vehicle for transformation and growth. And that's the disorienting dilemmas we talked about. But there are also others. For instance, if our egos get triggered, or questions, our own, who we are, our identity gets triggered. All of these things, conscious or unconscious, somehow stress us. So together with the external stress that we are experiencing in the form of social media and events from all over the world that I did not know about when I grew up, there were a lot of things going on that didn't really bother me. Today, when it's in the hands of our young ones, it is starting to bother more people everywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. And increasingly so.
increasingly so.
And this leads to the other domain that I want to explore before concentrating on sort of the pathway to liberation, shall we call it?
Yeah.
And that is that your observation toward the end there that they've done these studies, and 1/3 of the CEOs go backwards, they regress, 1/3 stay about the same, and 1/3 move forward. And I just wanted to comment that this is also true of large social movements. It was observed during the American Revolutionary War, for example, despite all the mythology of the Minutemen and everybody going to the revolution.
Yeah.
The reality was, in the face of the war itself, 1/3 of the colonists sided with the British and became even more patriotic. 1/3 stayed basically neutral, and about 1/3, took up the arms and fought the British. And that statistic of 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 seems to replicate itself pretty universally in dynamics of social change.
That's interesting. Can you elaborate a bit on that?
Well, it's a strange phenomenon that when humans are confronted by dramatic change, some people become conservative. Some, just shut their eyes.
Yeah.
The fight or flight. You
Mm.
got flight, you got the
Yeah.
fight. And then some of the people, just like the doe in the headlight, they just don't know what to do. So
Yeah.
that's the other response is
Yeah.
it's fight, flight, or paralysis.
Yeah.
You see it in nature,
Yeah.
you see it in human society. And I was just struck when you were talking about the CEOs. They replicate that very basic division of responses. And that raises in my mind questions about the woman who did this study and saying that the CEOs who went forward were motivated around curiosity. And I'm just wondering whether there was anything else that she said, because if we can crack that code, we can know a lot about how you get the paralyzed people, I guess, first, people that stay on the couch. And then we can work on the people who want to run away or, emerge in the past. And I raise it because, this is what we're seeing in the United States. The American electorate, by a significant majority, just voted for the flight response.
Yeah.
They voted for a man who everyone knows is a psychopath, and but who says we're going to make America great again. Right? So that's that reactionary, fear-based retreat into some fantasy about what America used to be, before we were exiled from the garden by those bad liberals.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
it plays itself out in countries.
Hmm.
And about, a third voted for Kamala Harris and some kind of movement forward. Most of the people didn't vote.
Hmm.
So that's that paralysis.
Yeah.
So to speak to us about that in particular, whether there was anything else on the curiosity
Yeah.
ingredient that triggers that one
Yeah.
third that we really want to cultivate and expand.
So what I'm thinking is that you should be inviting Alice here yourself so that she
I'd
can
love to.
present her so that she can present her PhD research, because I've merely read it. She's actually done
Yeah.
the research. And what she did was that she asked the guys to, in the study, they weren't CEOs, they were business leaders. So they could be any type of business leader as far as I understand it. And she's based in Australia. So I think she did it in an Australian setting. And what she did is she asked them to, throughout the program, have reflection diaries. And as she was a bit stunned about the results of the study, she went back to the reflection diaries and tried to figure out, what is it that I can see in their way of responding and reacting and reflecting during the whole program that stands out. And as far as I understood, and this is why it was so, I reacted exactly as you did. Oh my goodness, here we have the answer. Is that those, and it feels like I'm just saying this slower now, but let's see if I can put some more meat on the bone. That those people who actually, the one third stood out because they had the curiosity to meet and explore their own emotional discomfort, their disorienting dilemmas, and the
Mhm.
challenges that they lived with. They didn't go into them with fear. Even they actually did feel uncomfort, a lot of uncomfort. It didn't pull them back into their comfort zone. Their curiosity, and I think that's the key here, the word curiosity. The
Very
curiosity
interesting.
overwhelmed them, so to say, and made them explore what was going on
Yeah.
rather than being scared by it and, pulling back. So to me, there is this thing about curiosity killed the cat. I'm not so sure. But curiosity is also what has made the world grow, right? If we
Sure.
wouldn't have
Sure.
curious people, we as a civilization would have stagnated a very long time ago. So one of the first things I started thinking about is, oh my goodness, is this a personality trait or is it something else? So
Yeah.
that's also a perspective you could think of. You could
Yeah.
think of
Yeah. Yeah.
level of openness, for
Yeah.
instance, for
Yeah.
and level of extroversion.
And if you think
Um,
about the motivating impulses for curiosity, it's got to include courage
yes, and that's my own take on this. I
and
couldn't really see that.
self-esteem that
Yes,
I can
yeah.
do this. I
I
can
can
do
do this.
this.
I trust myself. I have an
Yeah.
inner compass. And
Yeah.
I don't know her material well enough to say that
Yeah.
came out of it too. But when I reflect on it myself, that is definitely needed. Without that inner compass, that to fall back on, how do I dare being curious? I probably don't. But if I have that inner compass and I trust myself, and then I'm open to explore other things. If it's like attachment theory, for children, if you have a stable, safe environment, it's you are more prone to go and explore. So there is something about this psychological safety too, I believe, in this, that would be really interesting to kind of try to pull
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
apart.
Yeah. Well, if you can put me in touch with her, if you know her or
I
anything,
don't know
I
her
would really.
personally, but I am talking to her in January, so I will
Well, good. Well,
definitely
then
do
let me
that.
know. See if she's interested and let me know because this is as they say, the $64,000 question.
Yes, it is. The thing is, the other person I stumbled on, which I think you should also bring on the show, is a really, really interesting person, that's Dr. Julia DeGangi. She wrote and that's the person I talked to you about, who wrote the book on energy rising, the
Oh.
neuropsychologist. I think she's based in Chicago.
And what's the name of her book?
Energy rising. It's not meant metaphysically, but she has some really interesting perspectives
Yeah,
on,
I'll track her.
and she's also married to I think he's a physicist. So she has some really interesting perspectives
Yeah, yeah.
on the human psyche, and she comes from a family of psychologists.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
And what I think she ties into this is that thing I talked to you about emotions again and the importance of emotions. And to her, because I've been talking a lot, I've been talking with her on a show like this, and she kind of translates this into emotional pain and emotional power. But when I read Ali's material and when I listen to Julia DeGangi, I hear the same thing. They are
Yeah,
both from using different vocabulary. They're onto the same mechanism from two
exactly.
different perspectives.
Yeah,
That is, whatever it
yeah,
is that creates emotional pain, discomfort, disorienting dilemmas, that is actually what will be able to, be your growth edge if you're curious enough to dare to, go through it.
yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah.
You
So
know,
those
this
two
is,
guys.
yeah. And Carolyn Mace, who's a very well-known author and medical clairvoyant, actually, she wrote a book called Why People Don't Heal. They
Ah.
can. And
Mm.
she makes the observation that I found startling at the time and still find startling, that she says the what's miraculous is not that we heal and can heal. What's miraculous is that we refuse to,
Yeah.
because we're more attached to the patterns of emotional response to our trauma, the self-pity, for example. That's worth more to us than actually changing our worldviews and going through the process of healing.
Yeah.
And so once you really get, and Gabor Mate also talks about this in his recent book, The Myth of the Normal, that what we consider normal is not normal at all. It's completely abnormal.
Yeah.
But we've all, as a culture and as families and as individuals, have become so habituated to what you were saying that we're traumatized. But the social compact is none of us are permitted to really show it.
Yeah.
We act as if it's everything. How are you today? I'm fine.
Mm.
And if you don't say you're fine, then,
It's
weird
strange.
things happen.
Yeah. Isn't it? Yeah. I think it's really interesting. You know what? This thing about Carolyn Mace, she's onto something here. Because ultimately, isn't it that it's about who we believe we are,
Yeah, exactly.
our
Exactly.
identity, right?
Exactly.
And which is, both conscious, first of all, but then we also have some sort of unconscious pattern. And that package somehow gets triggered, or if you expand it a bit, you have our values and beliefs, and whatever it is that triggers that is not kind of accepted by our system, so to
That's
say. We
exactly
do
right.
everything we can to push it
Yeah.
away.
Yeah. And you're
Yeah.
right that the breakthrough is connected to what's making us break down.
Yeah.
But our psyches and our social conditioning have perpetuated a whole social contract around the hiding of the breakdown and the
Yeah.
trauma.
Yeah.
And it's only a few people that kind of grok that and use it for breakthrough. So that connectivity and then the triggering mechanism is really one of the central questions that if anybody could crack that code,
Yeah.
we could change humanity. Because I think most people are, as the poets say, living lives of quiet desperation.
Mm. Yeah.
And that brings me to another the next thing I'd like to explore with you, because I found what you said earlier in your remarks about, forget which slide it was, but you were talking about that the whole thing starts with worldview.
Yeah. Castanella
Whatever your
Meadows.
worldview is
Mm,
really determines everything else.
mm.
And so I'd like to have you talk a little bit more about how the consulting you do shifts worldview, because the worldview is everything.
Yeah.
Worldview is everything.
I actually don't go in with that focus, but what I realize when you frame it like this is that that is what happens. It's the outcome. And that I'm in there poking things that are really uncomfortable. And I do that from two different perspectives. I work with strategy. And when working with strategy, strategy is the first, and then executive coaching is the second. And what I realized is that the quality of the strategy will not be better than the inner capabilities and worldview of those that actually craft the strategy. You see? And the strategy is how the business will survive and thrive in the world. And if those who actually craft that strategy have a worldview or an inner dialogue that is not conducive to life, so to say, of course, the quality of the strategy will not be what will be good for the future of humanity or for the future of the company long term, maybe short term, but not long term. So what I try to do is work using a language that feels comfortable, because this is where I come from, right? So I'm comfortable in speaking a language, a business language that makes other people feel comfortable in that setting. And it starts from the strategy point of view, and this is where it gets uncomfortable to some, actually. It starts then with us exploring where the future is going. You know, what is going on in our world right now? Where is the future going? And we start looking at scenarios of the future. So in what, directions could the future unfold? And given our current path, what will the world likely look like in 2050, for instance? And when we've discussed that, we come to a point where I ask for people to bring up their pen and their paper. At that point, we've done this for a couple of hours already. And some wonder, why we're so long, into the future. Because they feel, it should be here and now. But no, have patience. We're getting there. That's my message. So I asked for them to write a letter for their grandchild. If they don't have a child yet, some don't. Especially in the younger population of entrepreneurs that I'm working with. But I still ask everyone to write a letter to their grandchild, one person, or whoever who you want to write that to, who will live in that future, thinking about how old will I be, first of all, before I write it, how old would my children and grandchildren be, and that will actually be about the hopes of that grandchild and how they managed to build a better future. What we did right today that helped them build a better future tomorrow. And actually not focus so much on what the hell went wrong and things like that, but rather envision that better future that we want and try to understand, this is what we did to, this is how I contributed to. And this is the life I'm hoping for you to be able to live. And something in that process, it's slightly different in different groups, but in that process, something happened. It's like the coin drops, It's like suddenly everyone in that meeting has a personal relationship to the future and a personal responsibility to how it unfolds.
Mhm.
And what I realize when you use the term worldviews is actually what happens in that small exercise is a shift of worldviews, because you come from the achievist perspective where you optimize things for now, and you're asked to step into thinking about something completely different. And for at least for a moment, you're experiencing something that you're normally not experiencing, and that shifts something. And
Mhm.
if I don't do this exercise in a project, we don't really get there. We don't get to talk
Really?
about what really matters.
Mm.
We just stay on, the next 5 years, and not much shifts. Not much is different from, they tweak, and, they may be focusing on a competitor here and a competitor there and a new market there, but there are no major shifts. But when I add this exercise with the team, there is this realization that we need to do things differently. The world will look differently in the future because they've also seen what it will look like if we don't change. Those scenarios we've already explored. And then we go back in time and craft a strategy that is actually about our next 5 to 10 years, and think about who will we be
Mhm.
in the future that we want to co-create, to be part of co-creating. And of course, you need to do reality checks on that. You can't just build a fluffy picture of the future, but still, you're still living in that. Who do we want to be, and what do we want as a group to contribute with to build that future? And what's our position as a company? How can we, how can we help create that future unfolding? So
Yeah, yeah.
that's one of the things I do. And then, of course, there are small things all along this process that takes people out of their comfort zone to look at things from different perspectives that they're not used to. And then finally, in parallel, I normally work with at least the CEO or someone that is strategically responsible in the management team on a one-to-one level in executive coaching. And that normally doesn't start until we have, taken a few months into the journey, because before that, they don't really realize that they need it or even want it. So there is no window of opportunity. It's like talking well, they're polite, of course, but they're not interested. But suddenly it opens up a willingness to look at how they themselves can step up in their own capacities
Mhm.
and contribute to whatever it is that they understand now will need more of them than before.
Mhm.
So that's the process. And then there are a lot of other things I do too, but that's the most impactful part of it, I think, that I've found in shifting
Yeah,
minds and worldviews.
yeah, if you, as I was just contemplating this point about having them write letters to the future generation, what you're dealing with an individual who's probably very egoistic, achievement oriented
Yeah,
at a deeply personal level. And you're asking that person to extend the boundaries of the self
yeah,
from an egocentric to at least kind of an ethno-familial centric
yeah,
perspective. And that puts him in the context of the flow of time.
yeah,
It's what the Native Americans used to talk about in terms of thinking about one's the impact of what one does in the here and now to the children of the seventh generation.
yeah.
And if
It's
you,
inspired from that. Mm,
yeah. So that's what you're actually doing to these
mm,
people is you're getting them
mm.
to place themselves in generational time
Yeah,
and the impact of what they're doing within the lineage of consequences
yeah,
that play out from every act that we commit and every word that we say in
yeah,
effect. And so you're really extending their worldview.
I'm
And
doing one more thing actually, I'm realizing, and that is I actually connect the past with the present and the future.
there you go.
Yeah, so that flow of time is really important, I found. And if I
Yeah,
don't do that, they're kind of lost in the present again
that's
and a
right.
fluffy future.
Yeah.
So it's like the legacy of the past, and they may be very proud of their past or not, that depends on the context. But also how they tell the story of where they come from and how they've created value for normally very few actually just talk about shareholders. Very many rather try to see part of what good they've actually created for their community. But trying to understand what was the world then? What was our role in that world? What was our contribution? And then we took ourselves to where we are now. What did we do to end up where we are? What do we want to bring with us into the future? And what do we want to leave behind? And
Yeah.
then what barriers are there, for co-creating that future that we have envisioned? What barriers do we need to get rid of or let go? So it all sounds really easy, but of course, a lot of people involved, it's not easy, and it takes a lot of facilitation. But it's a great process, actually.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Well, Elizabeth, you've been very inspiring today. Thank you so much. I again want to say you're very deep. You're a deep soul, and you've really pondered these matters very carefully. And I'm sure you have a great effect on the people with whom you work. So thank you for what you do.
Thank you so much, Jim, for having me here. I'm so grateful. Thank you.
Elizabeth is going to join the after chat for a few minutes, everyone. If you want to join, you'll see the link in the chat box. You received the link in your Zoom reminders for today. And then just to take note of the reality of the calendar, next week is going to be our last week on Humanity Rising. Then we'll take a break next Friday for the holidays, and we'll resume on January 6th with a very, very full dynamic schedule that we've already been working on for a number of months. And so next week will be a 5-day program on the same theme that Elizabeth has been noting today. But in this case, it is a series of 5 authors. And the theme
Mhm.
is writing to right the world. How can we use our words to right the world? Because as you know, books like the Bible and the Quran and the Bhagavad Gita have had probably more impact on human history and human culture, human religion, than any individual who ever walked this earth. So the
Mhm.
power of the spoken word is quite extraordinary. And so next week, we're going to contemplate how the written word can help right the world. So thank you,
Wonderful.
Elizabeth. Thank you, everyone. We'll see you next week. Bye for
Thank
now.
you.